Hello everyone, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. Just wanted to do a video here on this whole topic of in vitro fertilization that's kind of been coming up lately. But before we get into that topic, from a Catholic perspective, of course, but before we get into that topic, just to let you know, if you like this video, if you like what I have to say, if you found it helpful, give it a like. It helps with the algorithm and everything, and comment. Let me know what you think. And if you want to support me, patreon.com/classicaltheist is a great way to do it. You get Q&A access unlimited per each month that you're a patron. I do a video of your request. If you want me to do it on a topic of your choice, you can do it that way. And you get monthly articles. I have like over 100 pages of catechetical notes that you'll have access to. So, and lots of other little things too that I need not get into in every single video, but it really helps to support my operation here. Okay, so on to this whole topic of in vitro fertilization. Well, to kind of preface the topic, it's kind of an unfortunate byproduct of the multi-layered complexity and philosophical depth of Catholic moral theology that oftentimes the correct moral stance of the Church that the Church proposes may be accepted by some or many, but for either the wrong reason or for merely secondary or tertiary reasons. I think this is kind of a tendency that happens with some of our more complex and more subtle moral doctrines. And this has the unfortunate consequence of misdirection, I think, in moral discernment. And if it's not guarded against, it can lead to more fundamental errors in moral thinking further down the road, or relating perhaps to other moral questions. And I don't think there's a better issue that encapsulates this issue, I think, than in vitro fertilization. And so that's why I want to talk about it today. Now, due to the relative novelty of this practice, I think, and consequently the underdeveloped theological reflection surrounding it in the life of the Church, as I indicated with respect to that whole tendency, the magisterium's condemnation of IVF has unfortunately not really been well received, to put it mildly, or even adequately understood. And not only by just the public at large, the secular public, but even by a lot of Catholics even who seek to defend the Church's very teachings on the issue. So to non-Catholics or dissenting Catholics, the teaching is kind of perceived as arbitrarily cruel. It's this rejection of couples who are in goodwill and just want nothing more than to have children of their own. But this video is kind of more addressed. It is addressed to them, but it's also, I think, more specifically addressed to Catholics wanting to defend the Church's teaching on the matter, because unfortunately they usually focus almost exclusively on the bad consequences of IVF that take place as a result of it. Namely the freezing and subsequent discarding of untold amounts of embryos, and no doubt this is absolutely something we should be talking about. But unfortunately, it kind of misses the fundamental point of that underlies the Church's theological condemnation of IVF. So if not the practical, homicidal consequences of IVF, which is bad enough, where then exactly is the malice? Like, where's the theological malice of the sin of IVF to be found, right? That's the operative question. It's not so much found in this or that consequence of IVF, but rather it's found in the intrinsic means whereby IVF is done. That is, so this is where the malice is found, and we'll spend the rest of this video articulating and defending it, but it's in divorcing conjugal union from the effect of sacred procreation. For here, as Cardinal Ratzinger puts it, I'll quote Cardinal Ratzinger, he says, "From a moral point of view, procreation is deprived of its proper perfection when it is not desired as the fruit of the conjugal act, that is to say, of the specific act of the spouse's union," unquote. So in other words, the conception of the child is inextricably linked to the spousal union of love as its divinely ordained principle of origin, to borrow a Trinitarian term. It is in this spousal union, which is, as the church teaches, the sexual relationship called for by the moral order, namely the relationship which realizes, and I'm quoting Gaudium et Spes here, the full sense of mutual self-giving and human procreation in the context of true love. In other words, because the conception of the child, the conception of children, proceeds naturally from the conjugal union of spouses, to bring about the conception of children outside of this natural principle of origin is essentially to deprive the child of that which is owed by nature to his or her very identity, namely that conjugal act of love, which pertains essentially to that identity's very intelligible structure. To put it another way, as it's impossible to discern the identity of any child without recourse to the procreativity of man and woman, so it is also impossible to disentangle the conjugal love from the active realization of that procreative capacity's power without contradicting its intelligible structure in the moral order. And it's really in this act of contradicting the intelligible structure of things that constitutes some violation of the natural law. The natural law reasoning of the natural law morality is really predicated on our actions respecting the intelligible structure of our nature and the acts that proceed from our nature's activity. So in light of that, it's no coincidence, therefore, that removing the exclusive bond of love from this process inevitably is going to lead to a characteristically unloving approach toward the handling of human life that proceeds from this mode of human procreation. So that's where the consequences, sort of these homicidal consequences, I think, are related to the more intrinsic reason for which IVF is wrong. So these embryos, which of course are distinct human beings endowed with immortal souls, they're discarded, of course, left and right. And this, of course, adds exponentially to the gravity of the sin. But the gravity of the sin is already, it's already there. Like, it already has a pre-existent gravity of its own. And so, therefore, if we only focus on this murderous consequence of IVF, we lose sight, I think, of the foundational reason why we must regard it as not only morally inadmissible, but intrinsically evil, and gravely so. In the church, under Cardinal Ratzinger's Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, I think elucidates this foundational reasoning in a way that is quite helpful. I've articulated it just now, but I'll give the church's explicit rationale. So in this instruction from the Congregation of the Doctrine of Faith, Ratzinger says, quote, "Only respect for the link between the meanings of the conjugal act and respect for the unity of the human being make possible procreation in conformity with the dignity of the person and his unique and irrepeatable origin." So that's a key phrase, irrepeatable origin. "The child must be respected and recognized as equal in personal dignity to those who give him life. The human person must be accepted in the parent's active union and love. The generation of the child must therefore be the fruit of that mutual giving, which is realized in the conjugal act wherein spouses cooperate as servants and not as masters in the work of the Creator who is love. In reality, the origin of the human person is the result of an act of giving. The one conceived must be the fruit of his parents' love. He cannot be desired or conceived as a product, as the product of an intervention of medical or biological techniques. That would be equivalent to reducing him to an object of scientific technology. No one may subject the coming of a child into the world to conditions of technical efficiency which are to be elevated according to the standards of control and domination. The moral relevance of the link between the meanings of the conjugal act and between the goods of marriage, as well as the unity of the human being and the dignity of his origin, demand that the procreation of the human person be brought about as the fruit of the conjugal act specific to the love between spouses. The link between procreation and the conjugal act is thus shown to be of great importance on the anthropological and moral planes, and it throws light on the positions of the magisterium with regard to homologous artificial fertilization," unquote. So what we see here is surprisingly no mention, really, of the abortifacient effect of in vitro fertilization, though that is, of course, mentioned elsewhere in the document. What we find here, though, in the document's fundamental rationale against IVF is instead a reflection on the ontological and therefore the moral integrity of the conjugal act itself as the child's natural, divinely ordained principle of origin. Now, to anyone who might say this is just a prime example for why moral systems, rooted in the natural law are too confined within the parameters of abstractions, and as a result of that confinement yield impractical outcomes for people, I think it really has to be said that this is not just a matter of natural law. As I've said before on various other occasions, the Church's teaching on human sexuality and marriage, it's not just rooted in these Aristotelian abstractions. It finds its origin within a framework of thinking that is thoroughly theological, not just anthropological, but theological. That is to say, as Catholics, we believe that human sexuality was created by God to be this cosmic icon, this sign of something of a theophany, really, that reveals a fundamental truth about higher levels of reality, reaching all the way to the inner triune life of the divinity itself. It's only by virtue of the exchange of this infinitely fecund love between the Father and the Son that the Holy Spirit proceeds from them both as by one principle and spiration, and fecund spiration at that. The fruit of the human procreation is modeled precisely after this Trinitarian dynamic, whereby fecundity is a fruit of union, a union of persons in this active and fruitful exchange of human conjugal love. It is only in this exchange of divine love between the Father and the Son and the Spirit and the Trinity, it is only in that exchange, and really just between the Father and the Son, that the Spirit himself receives his very identity. And so it is with children who are, in the Trinitarian analogy, they are likened to the Holy Spirit. So the Holy Spirit receives his very identity from that exchange of love between the Father and the Son. And so it's for this reason that to bring about human procreation, which is modeled after the Trinity, in a manner that isolates it from this natural principle of origin, this is why it constitutes a grave moral disorder, and indeed, really an act of violence against the child that's brought about through such an unnatural means of conception. So even if this process could be technologically perfected in such a way as to exclude abortion, or even, the masturbatory means whereby, seed is elicited and therefore polluted from the man, that's also a sinful component of this. But even if we were able to perfect the system which excluded those two effects or means, IVF would still remain this grave moral disorder because it would retain, I should say, the core essence of the theological malice that defines its sinfulness. Unfortunately, the points made here are much more subtle than the reasoning that we make use of to condemn, say, abortion or even contraception. And with those, there's an intuitively graspable sense of selfishness that underlies those evils, which makes it a lot. It provides us with an easier angle from which to condemn those acts. But with IVF, oftentimes, maybe even more often than not, the desire to pursue this means of conception arises from really a selfless motive. A desire to be blessed with an opportunity for lifelong commitments of this selfless love in the bearing and rearing of children, of new human life. And so we should commend those motives, but we have to remain steadfast at the same time about the evil that's facing us, and not just from these consequentialist angles, while they should still be mentioned. And the Catholic Church, it seems to me, is the only mainline Christian institution advancing this specific argument, and it's gaining all this popularity and traction. Even the Republican Party has rubber stamped it. So I think we really need to do everything we can to assist the Church in defending the natural law on this point and defending it well, so according to the principles that I've outlined. So I hope that was helpful. I hope you got something out of this video. If you did, like I said, give it a like. Let me know what you think in the comments. And if you want to support me, that'd be really helpful. Patreon.com/classicaltheist. God bless you.